pretty safe to say. God give it, God take it away. It's the worldwide American way.
What's going on, team? Proof here, and today I'm coming at you with the spike ratings for standard from the Destructive Roar. And I wanted to do this a little bit differently because when I first was thinking about doing this, what's up, Atlas? When I was first thinking about doing this, I thought about just doing like a traditional star rating, but as I started to do it, it kind of felt unnecessary to do it that way based off of my feelings and interpretations of stuff as I've seen it, and based on my video about the deck discussion video that I put up. And after that, I thought about if it was necessary to do this or if it wasn't necessary to do it, just give my honest feelings about stuff. And after I thought about it, I kind of came up with a little more of a simplified system to give you guys my feelings and interpretations about the cards. So what I ended up doing was I thought about splitting it between 3 separate categories of core, which are the core pieces you need to have in your deck, speaking in the most competitive sense. The tech, which are basically just tech options, where after you put in your core pieces, where do you want to make space for tech options? And then benched, just to keep it a nice little football theme, where benched are cards that have little to no chance of being seen in the competitive atmosphere. And I thought this would be better and a lot less nuanced than a star rating video. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And yeah, let's go and hop into it. The way I did it was that I went from grade 0 to grade 3, and I did the best I could to put in alphabetical order. So if some get mixed up along the way, I didn't catch it, I apologize for that. So the first card we have is Cheer Girl Frannie, and her skill is act on rear guard, put her into the soul, put a card from the bottom of your deck or put a card on the bottom of your deck from your drop zone, and then you countercharge one. So, oh, I forgot to mention that I'm going to talk about each card with its pros and its cons, and then give a rating for it as well all together. So for her, her pros are she has really good deck refresh, because just having the means to be able to cycle cards back into our deck is really useful. A rare countercharge option, because from when all the cards panned out, our ability to countercharge was very restrictive, and Frannie being one of the pieces to be able to do that is really nice for her. She has nice synergy with Seifried, because with that deck refresh, you can put a key piece of your Seifried combo, aka a piece you want to call out from Seifried, back into your deck. That way you give yourself a higher chance of not missing on that particular search. It could be, and because of that, she kind of acts like your 5th copy or +1 copy of whatever your search target potentially is. The cons for her is that she's an extra grade 0 to slot into your deck, because she's not a forerunner, because forerunners don't exist at the current moment in the V series. And she has a pretty overall low impact, because the deck is all about keeping that pressure on your opponent, and she can help facilitate that in her own means, but sometimes she doesn't really do that. So sometimes you kind of just have a card sitting in your hand waiting to be useful, versus something that you could probably use to be more proactive. And from all of that, her rating falls to tech option, because when I'm looking at my personal experience and looking at some of the decks that were topping over in Japan, she pretty much got slotted in that +1, like she was that 50th card or 49th to 50th card if you played 2 of her that you would slot into your deck. Next up, we have Cheer Girl Marilyn, which is our sentinel in the draw trigger section. So very easy skill. Place her on guard, discard a card from your hand, and then the unit that's being attacked cannot be hit for that battle. And then sentinels mean you can only have up to 4 of them into your deck. So pros, she's a deck space saver, because being a trigger, she's very easy to slot into your grade 0 lineup, which saves your grade 1 space for more refined options that you want to use. So no longer are you forced to play, or no longer are you forced to slot 3 or 4, ideally 4 of your grade 1 spaces to be a PG. And so that just puts a whole lot of more flexibility into your deck building capabilities. Cons, I want to say none, because you can argue guard restrict, but that's pretty much just a con in general for PGs. I wouldn't want to slot that as a con. If you want to, definitely feel free to do that. And her rating is obviously she's a core piece, because being a draw trigger and having the fact that we have limited per se trigger options because we don't have a front trigger and stand triggers no longer exist. Putting her in that 4 slot is definitely what you want to do if you're trying to have the most maximized competitive build for Spike Brothers in Standard. Then we got my boy, Mecha Trainer. Mecha is king. When you ride on him, you draw a card. Very simple. I wish he came foil. So the pros for Mecha Trainer is that extra draw can add consistency to like looking for an extra piece. Sometimes you may not have a necessarily ride option for your grade 2, or you may be missing General Seifried or something. The extra draw means it's one less card going to your damage zone, which could just be that extra piece you need to put that, just keep your game going in a nice steady pace, a nice clean flowing fashion. And it does require a counterblast, so it saves on your future plays, such as your Spike Bouncer, your Seifrieds, and we get to those in a little bit. And just being able to just get a nice little handy refund when you ride upon it is super helpful. A con is it's the only starter available at the current moment, so it's a low con, but I still consider it, just in case you wanted to do something different. You can't really do that because Mecha Trainer is the starter that you have to use unless you want to play 16 grade 0s, which would be less than ideal because you start with 15 triggers in your deck. And from there, it also means you can also use Frannie, but Frannie doesn't have a skill when you ride upon her, so it's not that good either. So you're kind of forced to use Mecha Trainer in your build unless you want to hamper your deck in some form or fashion. So obviously he's core just because he's the only starter that's available at the current moment. All right, next up we have the vanilla triggers, and I wanted to do this a little bit differently because they're all vanilla, so they kind of exist in their own way. They kind of don't have a skill that I want to just break out, which seemed kind of weird to do that. So I just lumped them all together into their own little section here. And Tiara is obviously going to be core because it's your only heal trigger option. And then I consider both the crits core because we want to keep putting that pressure on our opponent. So you might be leaning towards an 8 crit 4 draw lineup, which means that you won't be playing Cheerful Links here. But if you choose to go in the other direction, then you go into the tech space of Cheerful Links. And I've heard people argue for 7-5. I've heard people argue for 6 and 6. I'm of the opinion of leaning more on the more aggressive side of playing at least 7 critical triggers. Dog's going crazy back there. And that's why I consider the critical triggers core, and then that's why I consider Cheerful Links to be a tech option. So those are all the grade 0s. Now I'm going to go into the grade 1 pieces. So the first grade 1 we have is Cheer Girl Jamie, which is the rare Sentinel, which is the grade 1 counterpart to Marilyn here. So exact same skill as Marilyn, she's just a grade 1, and she has 7k power versus 5k from Marilyn. I believe Marilyn has 5k. So the pros is that she's a budget PG option in case you can't get Marilyn, because Marilyn is a double rare. The cons for that is that it cuts into your grade 1 space, and there's a lot of really good grade 1s you want to be using in spikes and standard at the moment that you kind of don't want to be cutting into it if you don't have to. And in another case, she can be stopped by a certain guard restriction. So if a guard restrict says it stops a normal unit from being placed down, it stops Jamie from working. Unlike it does for Marilyn, because Marilyn is a trigger unit, so she gets around that particular restriction. And I know that exists in premium or standard in Phantom Black at the very least from Mega Colony. So just because she has the chance to be stopped more readily than Marilyn, that's why she's going to be benched, and you don't really want to use her in your competitive build. Next up we have Commander Garry Gannon, and his skill is auto on rear guard. When an attack that it boosts hits a vanguard, you put it into your soul, draw 2 cards, and put a card from your hand onto the bottom of your deck. And the pros to him is that he's a huge consistency bump because it allows you to dig more for pieces, so you can dig for General Seifried if you have it early, as early as your grade 1 ride. If you're missing General Seifried, it can help you get Juggernaut Maximum or Bracky, just so your high pressure units, to be able to call those early out into the game. On hit pressure, which could combo up with the dynamic that it has with General Seifried. A popular combo is that you put it behind your first attack and rear guard, and then you can attack boosted with it, and if they let it hit, you could then use Garry Gannon's skill to get an extra card into your hand before you attack with your General Seifried. or if they block it, that's less guard that they have in their hand to be able to use for your general Seifried attack. So it's a nice little 1-2 punch combo that's available to us. And then you can put your good search targets back to your deck, because if you get flooded with Juggernaut Maximum in your hand, for example, you don't want to have multiples in your hand. So instead of like using one to guard and then tucking it back with Wonder Boy, which I'm going to get to in a little bit, you can draw two with Garry Gannon here. Choose one of the generals, choose one of the Juggernaut Maximum in your hand and put it back to the bottom of your deck, so it could be called later either through Juggernaut Maximum himself or through General Seifried or what have you. Cons, I don't think it has a con. I think, as I said in my scout report video, I think he's the best grade 1 that Spike's got in the whole set, and it's just a rare. So to me, he has no cons at all, and he is absolutely a core piece to your deck. If you're not playing, I say 4, like straight up just 4, but if you're not playing at least 3 of him, then I feel your deck is a lot weaker than it could be. Then we got Funky Bazooka. He's auto on rear guard. When another unit is placed on rear guard in the same column as him, he gets plus 5,000 power until the end of turn. So for pros, 7,000 plus 5,000 is 12,000, which lines up very well against Accel Protect Vanguards, because a lot of your attacking pieces are going to be your grade 2s, and more likely than not it's going to be 10k. So 10,000 plus the 12,000 from Funky Bazooka here hits for 22,000, which is enough to force a critical trigger from your opponent, or you can scale it upwards with critical triggers or General Seifried skill. It lines up very well against those particular vanguards. It's easy to buff thanks to some of your other skills, such as your Bracky, Wonder Boy Juggernaut, beginning of main phase skills, General Seifried skill. And because of that, you can pretty much continuously have him be a 12k booster, which is nice and handy to have a dedicated booster back there. The cons, 7,000 makes for a very poor vanguard when you're going second, because most times your opponent's going to ride an 8,000 vanguard, and you need to have a booster behind it to be able to hit. And you don't, being Spike Brothers and trying to keep that momentum going, you don't want to give your opponent the opportunity to not take damage when you can help it. So if you ride him, you're pretty much forced to put something behind it, which could be very negative tempo for us in the future. And then another con is that your other grade 1s, they fill larger roles, which push the usage of Funky Bazooka down a notch, which because of that, it ends up become a tech option over being a more core staple. So still a good card all around. It has a lot of utility that people could probably find space for. It just falls into that tech category. Then we got Gyro Slinger. So auto on Vanguard or rear. When it's placed, put a card from your hand to the soul. Look at the top cards of your deck equal to your opponent's or to your Vanguard's grade. Call up to 1 from among them. Put the rest on the bottom, and the card that you call gets plus 5,000 to the end of turn. So this is a really easy, aggressive tool going first or second. If you're going first, you're kind of basing it more on the high roll. Like, you have a lot of call options that you can get, so your chances of missing a good target are decreased, but you still having that top 1 call versus having 2 or 3 as you ride up into your Vanguard could mean a chance to miss, but it could still be very aggressive because the card you call still gets power, so you're still putting that pressure on your opponent. It scales during the game, as I mentioned, because as you ride up, you have a higher chance, more cards to check, so you have a higher chance of hitting a piece that you definitely want to be calling out. And it's kind of a hand filter, so if your hand is kind of awkward with a lot of defensive pieces, but you need to be more aggressive leaning, you can give up one of those triggers or something and be able to give yourself a chance to call out an aggressive option to put pressure on your opponent, because giving up that trigger versus holding on to it and putting less pressure on your opponent could be the difference between winning and losing, just to help get you through that window. And as for cons, giving up a card could be detrimental just because you lower your defensive options to be more aggressive, so it's a trade-off there that you need to weigh. And then has a high chance of being vanilla later in the game, because as you're going through the game and you're getting your combos going, the chance that you're going to be using Gyro Slinger for his skill, it goes down, and you're going to be using it more just to be an AK booster. So I kind of call that a con, because while it can scale during the game, it can reach that critical mass point to where it's going to start going down and become more of a diminishing return and just be a quality booster. And that's not all bad, just because you want to give yourself the chance to be able to use it for that extra value purpose during the game, to where you can reap the benefits of being vanilla later. So because of all that, it's a core piece, because being able to call out some of your more aggressive options just to put that jump on your opponent is so good for spikes that you're not going to be really missing the cards you give up unless you use it recklessly. And there's been a lot of games where being able to use Gyro Slinger's ability has helped put me over the top, and it's just a really strong card, and it's a really strong core piece to have. Next up, we got White Tight End, and his skill is when it attacks, if you have 4 more rear guards, this unit gets plus 10,000 power until the end of battle. So one of the pros for White Tight End, the only plus I can really think of that's not like reiterating a lot of stuff I said before, is that he's a really nice potential standalone attacker, because being able to hit for 18,000 on his own is really good, which means he can hit for 28,000 if you use him on a 4 circle, and maybe if the stars align, you can use him for 38,000 if you call him out through General Seifried skill. The con, or a con, is that the boost only applies when attacking, which is a way to balance out the card since it's only a common, but it'd be really cool, really nice if it was able to boost for 8,000 or 18,000 if you fit the requirement, because the requirement is different enough that it probably wouldn't clash with Funky Bazooka, that I thought it'd be really cool to see that happen. And since you need to have 4 cards on the board to make it activate, sometimes you may not be able to achieve that particular threshold, just maybe just the opponent that you're facing, or it might be detrimental for you to put those rear guards onto the board. Like maybe you had to use a card for Gyro Slinger skill versus using White Tight End. So there's chances of it, I know I didn't mention it here, but there's chances of it that the requirement could be awkward for you to be able to not want to go for it. And because of that, it makes it more of a tech piece than a core piece, because that chance of it to be less than worthwhile is much greater than that of some of your other grade ones that you relegated to being a tech option. And then we got Wonder Boy, the bread. So his first skill is when he's placed, put a card other than grade 1 from your drop zone to the bottom of your deck, and then this unit gets plus 5,000 power to end of turn. Then at the beginning of your main phase, you can put him into your soul, and if you do, you search your deck for up to 1 other Wonder Boy and call it to a rear guard circle, and of course you shuffle for this one. So pros, very nice and easy deck refresh. It helps you put triggers back to your deck. It helps you put necessary grade 1, or not grade 1, grade 2s, grade 3s back to your deck. So your Brackies, your Panthers if you need to, maybe even a Juggernaut Maximum or something. Easy power gain, just being able to gain 5,000 just for putting the card back to your deck and helping you out is really efficient and really strong. And then in a way, it's a deck thinning, because you can filter out a Wonder Boy and put a card back, and then later when you redistribute that deck, or redistribute your deck, you can add +1 trigger back to your deck or something. Or you can just call out something, or call out the Wonder Boy himself and put a card to the bottom, and then for that turn you've thinned your deck out to be able to chance to maybe get another trigger, because the card going to the bottom has no bearing on what your top checks are going to be. Cons, cannot return grade 1s. We would love it too, but Bushiro thought it'd be very powerful, almost too powerful, to be able to recycle Wonder Boys himself back to your deck, have a stream of main phase calls. And as we'll get to in the premium video, not being able to return grade 1s can stop it from having an infinite loop happen. I want to talk about that more in that video if I remember to. And the rating, absolutely core. Like, Wonder Boy is a card you're definitely going to be playing in your deck, because having that deck refresh is going to be so helpful when you're continuously calling cards out of your deck and trying to beat your opponent over the head with them. Being able to have 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th potential options of a same card is really strong and really nice to have. Next up, we got Bomb and Tailback, which is the vanilla 10k, and the skill is nothing because it's just a vanilla. So the pros for it, it makes a pretty decent backup ride if you miss out on your primary ride option, which is Spike Bouncer, without reducing your other pieces, so you don't have to ride your Panthers, your Brackies, or what have you, so you can have those on your rear guards to be able to put pressure on your opponent. And it has good shield value because it being a 10K. The cons that is vanilla, so it's just kind of just there as a tech piece, which is why I gave it the rating of tech, because as I mentioned in my deck discussion video, there might be an opportunity there for you to add a couple higher shield value cards in your deck if you so choose to where you might look into these other avenues of your bomb and tailback. And I think it does well enough being a backup ride that you won't feel as bad adding it to your deck as a tech piece. Next we got Diabolic Diabolic middle guard, and on guard circle during the battle that your grade 3 was attacked, it adds plus 10,000 shield, so it becomes a 15k shield for grade 3 protection. So your pros, 15k shield is a very quality value for it being a mobile critical trigger, and then it works from your hand, so you don't have to need that awkwardness of having it on your rear guard and having to intercept with it, so you can just work straight from your hand. It helps protect your Vanguard, and in addition to that, it can protect some of your rear guard Juggernaut Maximums, because Juggernaut Maximum is such a prime target for being attacked that sometimes you want to be able to protect it, that having that extra shield value could stop maybe like a 30k attack. No, not 30k, maybe like a 24k attack on it or something that's like just enough to annoy you, that and just enough to hit over a grade 1 shield, where Diabolic middle guard could come in handy there. The cons, it's a very bad ride. One of the perks of being a force clan is that a lot of our prime grade 2 targets are 10Ks, and sometimes the Excel and the Protect clans need to do something a little bit extra sometimes to be able to hit on our 10k base, most notably from the Protect or from the Excel clans. So if you ride a 9k versus one of those clans, they don't need to do that little bit extra to be able to force us to act, which could be annoying enough to where you'd never want to ride this card. And just like bomb and tailback, having that higher value shield option makes it a tech option to me, because sometimes you might find yourself in a situation where you want to have that extra shield value. And then Fierce Leader Zachary, auto on rear guard when it's placed from your hand, counter blast 1, look the top card, or if you do, look the top card of your deck, call it to rear guard circle, and then at the end of turn, put that card to your soul. So the pros is that it feeds soul for if you're playing a more United Attacker build. It promotes early aggression because you have an additional top call. The cons, this is just a few of the cons. There's other cons that I didn't mention here, but it's an awful ride for the same reason Diabolic middle guard is, but it's an 8k. Only checks the top 1, so you're more of a high roll nature. The card goes to the soul at the end of turn, so you don't get that, you get a temporary plus, but you don't get that sustained plus to be able to use that card again, which makes it a really bad spike bouncer type card. Because if you're going to be using, if you're thinking about using this one, you may as well be just maxing out your spike bouncers instead, because you get the exact same ability on Vanguard or rear guard, and you get to keep the card around for later. So because of all that, like, this card went from core to being benched the second that spike bouncer was revealed. So sad for my boy here, but it just doesn't quite make the cut for our versions of the deck. And then high speed Bracky, Fast Bunny. When it's placed, this card gets plus 10,000 to the end of turn. It works only on rear guard. And then just like Wonder Boy, it can search itself out at the beginning of your main phase, if it exists still. Pros, it has game long utility, and it's a high pressure unit, because being able to attack for 20,000 early on in the game is really useful. And then as the game goes on, it can become a 20k or become a 30k with calling through General Seifried skill. And it's incredibly easy to power up, because all you need to do is place it from your hand to the rear guard circle. Like, no extra requirement, or it doesn't even have to be called from hand, because if you call it through its ability, it gets powered up again as well. So if you call it through its own ability, if you call it through Seifried, it lands with plus 20,000 power, because it gets an additional from General Seifried skill. And then just like Wonder Boy, it acts as deck thinning, except in this case you get to add a trigger back to your deck or a utility piece back to your deck, Bracky just comes straight out of your deck and just sits there. So you just thin your deck out of a normal unit and just kind of try to filter your deck to be more trigger compressed. Cons, there's potential to scale awkwardly as the game goes on, because 20,000 only hits for 10,000 shield on all vanguards, but the second you put a 8k booster behind it, it forces more pressure on all of them, and it scales exactly with other force clans. So if you use it through its, if you call out through General Seifried skill, it suddenly becomes a 30,000, and then put a booster behind it, become 38,000, which is really high pressure, and it lines up perfectly with force clans, and then it just adds pressure to the Excel and to the protect clans as well. So if you're trying to get maximum use out of your bracket, you're gonna have to commit a booster behind it, when sometimes you may not have those available. But even then, it's just such a small con that it remains a core piece, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. Spike Bouncer, our premier grade 2 Vanguard option, because when it's placed either on Vanguard or Rear Guard, you Counter Blast, Soul Blast, and just like Gyro Slinger, you look at the top cards of your deck equal to your Vanguard, call one from among them, and then put the rest to your bottom. Call up to one from among, put the rest to the bottom. And then on Rear Guard, at the end of the battle that it attacked, you can Counter Blast one, tuck it into the soul, and draw a card. So the pros, it is a legitimate plus option tool, which is very rare in the history of Spike Brothers have a legitimate plus option. Early aggression tool, because you can call it out on your grade 2 ride, Counter Blast, Soul Blast, the guaranteed soul that you're gonna have. Check the top 2 because it counts itself as the Vanguard, and you can call from one of 2 options. So you can hit a Bracky, you can hit a Juggernaut Maximum, you can hit a Panther, just to be able to promote that early aggression for not committing more out of your hand. A board refiller if you have spare Counter Blast to use, and then a deck thinner as well, because once you put a card out from your deck and put the rest at the bottom, you may have a better chance of checking the trigger based on what the knowledge of what you saw go back to the bottom that your opponent doesn't see. And then after you reshuffle your deck, if there's triggers that you tuck to the bottom, those get redistributed back into your deck, just like all the other put to the bottom cards. And then another pro that I didn't mention here is that having that ability to use his rear guard ability could come in handy against the likes of Kagero, and then in the future other board control clans, because you get use out of our card, and then we can put it to the soul and then draw a card to be able to protect ourselves later. Maybe get that extra dig for a PG, an extra dig for critical shield trigger that we might be able to use. Maybe we draw a normal unit and then give ourselves a higher chance of checking a trigger unit on damage check. A lot of utility being able to come out just from digging one extra card from your deck. Cons, he can conflict with General Seifried for Counter Blast usage as the game goes on. Because as the game starts to get down to the nitty gritty, you're probably going to be using more of your Counter Blast on Seifried than you would be on Spike Bouncer. That doesn't mean you're not going to be using them, but there's a chance for that confliction there, to where Spike Bouncer might become just a vanilla beater later in the game. So just something to look out for when you're using Spike Bouncer here. And because our premier grade 2 Vanguard and the best grade 2 Vanguard ride in the deck, he is absolutely core to your deck, and you want to try to get 4 of these as fast as you can, because it's a double or triple rare, so it's going to be likely going to be more expensive. But snap these up, because if Spike starts to show good performances, they're going to start going up in price, probably on the back of this card here. And then I believe the last grade 2 Treasured Black Panther. So auto on rear guard, when it attacks, Soul Blast 1, this unit gets plus 5,000 power or plus 15,000 power at the end of the battle. If it gets plus 15,000 power, put it to the soul. So for the pros, it has easy power, and it's the highest standalone power in your deck when you use the skill for the 15,000 skill. Because with the 15,000 skill, it hits for 25,000 power, which is higher than what any other cards you have in your deck unboosted can hit for. So because of that, it makes it a really potent finisher if your opponent's at 5 damage and you're trying to just get over the top there. You want to be seeing more Panthers than you want to be seeing more Brackies, especially if you're combining it with General Seifried skill. You're going to have a bunch of soul to be able to use with Panther here, so you're not likely going to be running dry there. And then it can get pieces out of soul, because with General Seifried being on hit, which we're going to get to shortly, there's a chance that you're not going to be able to get necessary pieces out of soul, which what Panther does for you is be able to get your brackies that you tuck into your soul so you can refund them later. Same with Juggernaut Maximum, same with triggers you may have put into the soul for the cost of Gyro Slinger. So I know Spike Bouncer can soul blast as well, but beyond your grade 2 and maybe early grade 3 stages, you're not going to be using Spike Bouncer for his ability, so that means you're not going to be being able to get that soul blast out of there. So easy manipulation of your soul through Black Panther here to be able to get your pieces out of your deck, out of your soul. And then the cons can have soul conflict with mid-game General Seifried if you don't manage it well. And what I mean by that is if you use Spike Bouncer and you use his skill, you go down to 1 card in soul. And then if you call Panther out and use the skill, you go to 0 cards in soul, which means if your opponent is playing damage denial on you and you combo those two up, you won't be able to get an extra card into your soul with General Seifried unless you have something like Frannie at the same time, which could lock you out of General Seifried's skill, which puts less pressure on your opponent. So some like long-term thinking things to think about when you're trying to utilize Black Panther here is just sometimes you might just get in your own way, and it's something to look out for. And I went from thinking that you could cut Panther out to being able to think like you absolutely need to play 4 of these because of the potency that I saw in testing, to where I think it's absolutely a core piece to your deck. I know I keep saying absolutely core a lot, but that's whatever. You definitely want to be playing at least 3 Panthers. I argue 4 because I think 4 is just a great number because of all the filtering that we do, but he is definitely going to be a core piece to the functionality of your deck. Now on to the grade 3s, we got Uncle Ryzen. Frontline Command Sigiswald. So auto on rear guard at the beginning of your main phase, you can put them into your soul and put a card from your drop zone on the bottom of your deck. You draw a card and countercharge 1. So pros, it's deck refresh and it's resource management. So it's kind of like a bigger version of Frannie, minus the fact that he draws your card for the delayed latency of it, and that's really good just because we have limited soul, or we have limited deck refresh, because Wonder Boys can run out either through being damage checked or just using them all throughout the course of the game. Frannie is a tech piece that you may only have 1 or 2 of, and then Uncle Ryzen here, he just kind of helps fill that void if you choose to go that route. Cons, he has no gift, which is very unfortunate, and being a grade 3 without the gift, he is so low impact that you don't want to include it because the chances of you riding on him just will hurt your whole game. And I know you can get around that by guarding with your grade 3 and get it out of your hand, but that's such a huge tempo blow to you that you don't really want to go that route. And it's also really slow because it needs to exist until your next main phase, unlike Frannie, which has the immediacy of being able to be used as soon as you put her onto the board. So to get max use out of Uncle Ryzen, you need to put him into the back row, preferably behind Vanguard. You need to live your opponent's next turn as opposed to trying to push hard with your resources, and then you get the refund that he offers you. So he kind of does nothing on a turn, or unless you want to use him as a magnet for attacks, which would be kind of cool. So it goes from being a 0 shield value to becoming like a 10k 15k shield. But at the same time, you can also use Juggernaut Maximum, you can use Bracky, you can use Panther to try to beat your opponent with your resources over trying to take the slower pace game when you already have enough card generation as it is through Seifried. You can get advantage through Spike Bounce, you can get cards through Garry Gannon. I don't think he has enough impact, despite the fact he could be a magnet, to be included in your deck. And then of course the chance to ride it means would be very awful. So my overall rating for him is that he's going to be benched, with a caveat is that he'll be experimented with, because it's enticing to think that you can just call him out, he becomes a magnet, and then you can get the refunds afterwards. But I think after the experimentation phase is over, he's gonna become benched overall. So sick art, and I like the head canon that I put into my head that he's Uncle Ryzen, because he looks a whole lot like him, or Grandfather Ryzen, Father Ryzen, who knows. And then we got the premier boy, General Seifried, our principal grade 3. So he has 2 skills. The first one is act on Vanguard, counterblast 1, put one of your rear guards to the soul, search your deck for up to 1 copy of the card you put into the soul, call it to rear guard circle, and until end of turn, both him and the card that you called gets plus 10,000 power to end of turn, and then you shuffle your deck. And then the second skill is when the attack hits, you can soul blast 2, stand one of your rear guards, and you choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retires it. So some of the pros here, he is the crux / the linchpin of your deck, because your deck functionality goes way down if you miss out on riding General Seifried as soon as possible, in my opinion. He has incredible on-hit pressure, because if you get him down as soon as you ride to grade 3, or the ability to ride to grade 3 and put the force marker on him, he's a standalone 23k attacker with the on-hit pressure of being able to plus +1. You can +1 card or drive check, get +2, and then you can minus your opponent's board, and then you can stand one of your own rear guards, which might be able to force more cards out of your opponent's hand, or get you another damage on top of that. So it's a really annoying, pesky card while being really powerful at the same time, which it kind of makes your opponent wiggle. I don't know the right term for that. It just makes them uncomfortable, because they need to keep stopping this on-hit Vanguard that could just burn down their field slowly, or burn down their hand at the same time. Rare field control, which is rare that we have field control. It's also rare that when we get that field control, it's efficient. Really efficient field control at the same time, and it's a welcome addition to the clan, because if we could draw as well, that just be extra spice on top of that. But just being able to control your opponent's rear guards and their resources just comes in huge handy over the course of the game. And then deck thin and scaling all in one, because the cards you get gets just an automatic trigger buff on it, which can help scale over the top of your opponent's rear guards or Vanguard, or if they hit a trigger themselves, they can still hit for the old same shield value that could have forced otherwise. So it's a lot all in one, and that's just the tip of the iceberg for the pros, because there's a whole lot of other stuff in here, like being able to soul blast out pieces, just being an all-around, like just having the force gift to be able to spread the wealth to your other rear guards. It's a really, really strong card, and that's why you need to want to be on him as soon as possible. Cons: targets can run out if you're not careful. So if you get little, and by caveat that, counter blast as well, because if you get a little reckless, I guess for lack of a better term, or a little overzealous with your resources, you can run out of necessary cards to call, and you can run out of counter blast to be able to get you over the hump later in the game. So it's a card you want to be mindful of your resources, and when you want to go in on using those resources to be able to buff up one of your cards. So as much as I hyped up the card, he is definitely a core piece. You need to be playing 4 of him, otherwise your deck is going to be far worse than it ever could be. Juggernaut Maximum, so has the force gift, and then on Vanguard or rear guard, when it's placed, it gets plus 10,000 power to end of turn. And just like bracking like Wonder Boy at the beginning of your main phase, you can search out a copy of him if he's still on your rear guard circle. Pros: he's an impressive standalone beater, because he's 13k, and then the turns you call him or ride him, he gets an additional 10, so that means he's at the very least 23,000 power. And then like Bracky and the boy, they easy power, and then the deck thin. And he's not an awful bridge Vanguard if your General Seifried turns up a turn late. And in the case where you need to ride Juggernaut Maximum first, that's when you're going to be putting your first force marker onto your rear guard circle more than likely, because Juggernaut here already gets the power, so he's already attacking for 23,000, and you're going to be given that additional power to your rear guard to be able to push through. So on your twin drive, if you hit a nice little critical trigger or something, your rear guard is going to be plus 20,000 power and being able to put more pressure on your opponent while you wait for Seifried to show up. And then if not, then you should have a pretty decent enough vanguard to be able just to help get you there potentially, because you already gave your force marker to your rear guard, so future rear guard is going to be more powerful in that case. And as for cons, unless you want to consider riding it a con, I don't think it really has a lot of cons. It's a really efficient grade 3, and it's definitely one that's core to the deck because of what it can do as a rear guard, just being a huge attacker. And it's another piece that's a magnet, because your opponent is going to be so afraid of Maximum coming down again for 23,000 that they're going to put resources into him more than likely that you can use to your advantage. And it's a super strong card and definitely a core piece. And last but not least, we got Unite Attacker. His skill is act on Vanguard. Once per turn, you can Soul Blast 7. Look at the top 5 cards from your deck, call up to 5 cards to rear guard circle, and then put the rest to the bottom. And then 3 units in your front will get plus 5,000 power to the end of turn. So the pros, he's a board refill, which comes in handy against the likes of Kagero. Maybe if you can get it off early, it can be really useful just to help set up future plays as well. As for cons, Soul Blast 7 has the potential to take a while to reach, because unless you tailor your deck for it, your ability to put cards to your soul comes through using Gyro Slinger, not using Spike Bouncer's first skill, but instead calling one to rear guard using just the second skill. Zachary, which is a card that we call the bench card, which is not overall useful. And then being able to get the Bracky Wonder Boy Juggernaut chain off to be able to put cards into your soul at the beginning of your main phase. So you can manipulate it, but you're kind of going against what you want to be doing with your deck to maybe reach it. And then the skill, once you get to Soul Blast 7, has diminishing returns the longer the game goes on, because the way they design standard spike cards when they interact with each other is that they're going to be you're going to be filtering out your deck so much that by the time you might reach the point to being able to use Unite Attacker, your deck might be so compressed with triggers that when you check your top 5, you might see three or more triggers and have 2 cards to call. So you spend all this time amassing soul to only be able to call 2 units. Excuse me. So because of that, and then it has low impact as a Vanguard early unless you were able to live the dream and get the 7 in soul to soul blast it. And I don't think it's going to be worthwhile to aim for that when General Seifried puts so much more pressure on your opponent. And I don't know if he does well enough, even in that case of if you miss General Seifried and you ride Unite Attacker, where do you want to be on him, or would you rather be on Juggernaut Maximum, who gets the automatic power the turn you ride it? So all that said, I think it still has a home as a tech piece. Not quite benched, but I'm kind of, maybe in the future as we see things pan out, he's going to make his way over there. But I think it can exist in a one-off capacity. Maybe you might be able to reap the benefits of it, but it remains to be seen. And that does it for all the cards. And in total, there's 13 core pieces. So if you do the math, if you take out 1 core being Mecha Trainer, there's 12 core pieces. And it kind of goes in line with my deck discussion video when I talked about the Japanese standard, which was 4 ofs across the board, and then you round out the deck with your Mecha Trainer and then a 1 of tech piece. So 12 times 4 is 48, which is the 12 core cards that aren't Mecha Trainer in multiples of 4, and then you add in that extra Mecha Trainer to get the 49. And I kind of call it I know I call it Japanese standard. I started calling it the all 4s lineup because you take just the 12 core cards that I mentioned above and just make them in multiples of 4, and you have your deck pretty much. and then you have 6 tech cards, and then the total of 3 bench cards, which I don't think are going to be really seeing a lot of competitive play. So, I'm tired. So that's it for the standard overview and my ratings for the spike cards coming out of Destructive Roar. I plan to do this for premium as well. It's going to be a little different, but a lot of the stuff is going to be similar enough to where I will go through it there, but I'm probably not going to read off the skills of all the cards. I might just leave a little preface saying pause the video if you want to read the skill before I continue on. But that's just mumbo jumbo for later. So hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what your ratings are. Maybe if you had your own little system that you put into place, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts and opinions on some of the cards. And yeah, that'll do it for me. And until next time, peace. Be easy.